Whoa. Okay.
You awake now?
Yeah. My head is sweating, but when you have a hairline like mine, that's common.
Hi, I'm David Voorhees, host of Running Hot, the business insurance podcast. Today I have with me Harry Campbell, small business investor, mentor, and keynote speaker, Hall of Famer. Also, Who's Your Daddy? So at some point, I want to zoom in on his shirt. It's taken a few people a couple minutes to fully get that. So I'm giving the audience a little bit of a precursor to it. So when it zooms in, because Morgan will do a phenomenal job on doing that. But
Cool.
Harry, welcome to the show. Happy to have you.
Thank you.
So you said you've done a little pre-work, so you've looked to see what it is. We have 5 sauces. Those are for me. I get to enjoy them. The 6th sauce we pay you for. It goes to the charity of your choice if you get to it. But I'm sure you have the charity already picked out. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the charity?
I do. In the speaking business you mentioned, I give 100% of my gross speaking fees and my book proceeds. I have 3 books I wrote. I sell them on Amazon. And I give 100% to a charity. It is Head for the Cure. It happens to be a Kansas City-based charity on Oak Street. And it has to do with funding research to try to eradicate brain tumors and brain cancer. My wife, unfortunately, was diagnosed with a malignant inoperable brain tumor, so what I'm trying to do is support her in ways beyond words with my actions and try to do that in a way that shows my love for her that isn't so hollow as all the just words that I had done previously, and I love the speaking pieces. I have raised and donated $648,000 so far.
That's
from
awesome.
My speaking business.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, I've had the privilege of hearing you speak on more than one occasion. It's always a new experience. But
me too.
Yeah, that's right. My partner, he always tells me anytime they let me go on a sales call, you never say the same thing more than once. I said, I'm having a conversation with somebody I just met. It's got to be something fresh. All right. Well, let's get started. So we've got our first sauce. This one is, the first 3 are tasty, so nothing you got to really worry about. We'll just put a little bit on your plate. We don't need to put a ton of it. So bravado, creamy herb, and jalapeno. I say herb purposefully because our last guest wanted to remind me that the H in herb is silent. So go for it. Pick whichever one. We'll get started. Pretty good taste. One of those ones that just wet the palate.
Mm-hmm.
So,
quite good.
Yeah. So I think it would be really helpful if you shared a little bit about your business background. As you mentioned, you've worked in very large organizations, started and run smaller organizations, but maybe talk through the chronology of some of your time at Walmart, at Drury, at different companies, and just some of those high-level experiences that have taught you who you are today.
Sure, I'd be glad to do that. Probably the most important and fundamental foundational thing that happened to me is I started with Procter & Gamble. Came out of business school, went straight from undergrad to business school, so no work experience other than summers. And then I had 7 years in Procter & Gamble, and it is an extraordinary company. It believes that marketing should be the function that runs the company. They spend the marketing dollars, but that's not the end-all to be-all. They also manage the brand, and they handle the brand, and they think about the brand so that Crest or Tide or Secret or Sure can be around for decades. And that was the foundation for my understanding of getting into business, and I loved that. I left there after 7 years, came to Kansas City in 1992 to work for Sprint. Now, I've worked for a bunch of different companies in Kansas City, but I've never left. People ask me now where I'm from, and I say I'm a Hoosier. I've been here 32 years, and it seems like eventually I got to start saying I'm from Kansas City. And I loved my time here. I've worked for Sprint for 5 years. Then I quit, and in the middle of my career in my late 30s, I did something that's very unusual for large company people. I ended up being the co-owner of a sports marketing firm. We won the Mr. K Award in 1998, and I loved it. What we did was we helped companies build their business by using sports. So think of the FedEx Orange Bowl, those kind of things. I loved it, and I'm a sports freak, and it was phenomenal. Now, unfortunately, I made a bad decision at that point, sold my half of the business because I wanted to get into the dot-com roll-up of 1999. How'd that work out for you, Harry? Well, not well. I went on a couple of house hunting trips to San Francisco, thought I might move to Silicon Valley. Didn't. Moved into the world of dot-com roll-ups, but I did in Kansas City. UClick was a spinoff from Andrews McMeel. And what we did was we syndicated branded content. So if you ran a website and wanted Doonesbury or Dear Abby or Garfield, you bought it from me, and then I gave the money to the creator. Unfortunately, we were eyeballs-oriented for revenue in 1999. If you weren't named AOL, there really weren't enough eyeballs to make the business work, so we failed. Gotta love the idea that Harry did that. I sold a half of a profitable business in sports that I loved to get into the dot-com roll-up to find myself unemployed at the age of 39. Ouch. Fascinating what happened next was, because I took my own advice and left well when I left Sprint. I tell my kids this all the time. If you're going to leave, leave well. Ask the people you're leaving if you can help, you can transition, you can do some things for them. A lot of times they'll say no, but leave well. Because I left well, I went back to Sprint. I got a chance to do that. Got a couple of real lucky breaks, which is the other thing I tell my kids. Preparedness and opportunity are great, but at the end of the day, you got to have some luck. I got very lucky. I was an interim person in charge of marketing and sales for a huge division of Sprint. My boss was needed elsewhere. They needed an interim. They put me in the job and said, you're not going to get this. You're too young. You're about 5 years early, but just take care of it while we interview around the country. I'm insidious. The people results started getting better. The business results started getting better, and after 6 months, they finally said, okay, and they gave me the job. Had a nice run. When Sprint bought Nextel, Embark was spun off. I went on the spin-off. Dan Hesse was my boss for a number of years. I was the president of the very large organization that ran the entire consumer business for Embark. It had about $3 or $4 billion in P&L responsibility. And then Embark was eventually sold, and I ended up doing what I'm doing now, which is being W-2 retired, but making a career of relevance for the community and for people around here by speaking, by mentoring, and by investing, and I love doing that. I did have one job when I was kind of retired, and it came to me, and it was with DuraVision. You mentioned it, and I ended up being the CEO for Dr. Dury and Dr. Stahl, and it was a family-run business, and they needed someone from the outside to come in and do some specific things and to run it. It was south of 435. I was kind of toying with full retirement, and I did that for 5 years, and I loved it. So I went back to my roots of small business. So I've kind of had this in and out of big and small businesses, and the perspective that I got was that the issues are very similar between them, because the issues that you face as a business owner have to do with people, and people don't change between big and little companies. What I did personally and operationally and strategically was very different when I had 4,000 or 5,000 people in my group. But what I did on a day-to-day basis in order to drive inspiration, motivation, and success was the same, because the issues are about people.
You know, that's such a wise comment in relationship to people don't change from small to big business. It's the X's and O's might change, but the person it doesn't. And I think a lot of times we look at candidates or individuals of you're more big business oriented and little business oriented. Well, it's just because your attributes are more suited towards that versus necessarily your ability to execute.
I like that, yes.
Well, that was awesome. I will tell you, I worked at Sprint for a minute, probably back at a very similar time. It was during that Nextel acquisition. By the way, this is Bravado Spice Company, Serrano and Basil. We're moving up to medium. I was a department assistant 3, which was, I think, one of their fancy terms for administrative assistant.
That's such a big company.
Department assistant 3. Yeah, right? I loved that job, and I did look at the director's office, and I asked how long would it take me to get there, and they said 10 years. I gave up on that endeavor the minute she told me that answer. So now you'll start to notice a vinegar attribute to these. I think it's really good. I do this as my side living, so spicy is relative, but are you feeling any tingles there?
Not really yet.
Okay, good. So,
I think I gotta revise my answer sometimes because I don't want to taunt you into turning up the
I can't.
dial.
I can't turn it up. This is it. This is it. Well, it's not actually, but we don't have the other one. They surprised me with Pepper X, which is now the hottest pepper on the planet. I think it was the show before last, or maybe the last show. And when it does release, I don't get scared often. If I do, you don't see it in my face. I promise you, you'll see it in my face because it's a hot pepper.
Ooh.
So, of all the topics that we just covered in your background, and I appreciate that, the thing that stood out to me most was you said, I failed. So somebody who has been a success in their career, somebody that is sought after to be a speaker, to give them feedback, to be a mentor, what stood out to me is you just admittedly said, I failed. Why is it so powerful for a leader to say, I failed, and how do you learn from failure?
I love to come clean. I come clean with myself regularly to make sure I'm not kidding myself. And I try to do the same thing with the people around me, whether it's my direct report group or all the people in my organization. And a lot of times what I do is I spend time talking to myself while I'm in front of everybody. They wouldn't know it, but that's what I'm doing because I'm trying to make sure I do that. And when I took that job thinking I was going to be such hot stuff in the internet startup world and moved to potentially Santa Clara or San Jose or San Francisco, and the job never came forward, but the one in Kansas City did, so I took a job in Kansas City. And when it failed, I was shocked. I'd never failed to that degree and measure. I'd had projects that didn't work out. I can't even tell you how long it took me to get over it. Several days, and I like to joke about it. You can crawl into a fetal position, put your thumb in your mouth, and go in your desk when something like that happens. My wife would say I kind of became a hermit a bit because I think I was embarrassed, I was mad, I was sad, and I was angry all at once, and it was all wrapped up. And then I realized I got a family to support, I'm unemployed, it's time to get after it and get my next thing and try to make sure I learn from what I had done and launch forward. I don't even like thinking about that period of time. It was brutal. To be 39 with a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, I was divorced, and I was unemployed, was scary. I wasn't sleeping well, and I realized I have to kind of take charge of myself and figure out what's next and get after it, and that's what I did.
I always find it fascinating how people deal with failure. And like you said, some people do. It's so difficult for them. They have no other choice but to protect themselves and hide under their desks, you know. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, at the end of the day, self-preservation is our most core, most intimate response to anything. And some people just aren't equipped to go fight, right? I mean, that's why we all have different strengths. But we were talking about Wayne Simeon earlier before, and some of his best stories, and when we're talking about Kobe, because Kobe was one of the best at taking people who discounted him, people who doubted him, and turning it into fuel. Now, he was probably an elite person as it relates to being able to maneuver his mind to get the best out of himself. But that resonates with me because I don't like to not be liked, but at the same time, it just fuels me. I mean, if people, I'm probably doing something right if someone's not liking something I'm doing because what I'm doing is meant for positive intent. Yes. So I think everybody approaches failure differently, and if you can use it as a lesson, it often can provide, very valuable wisdom for you moving forward. So that's why that stood out to me.
One of the statements I tell my kids frequently is bad news needs to travel fast. I said it is so easy to have good news travel fast. It's going to. Mm-hmm. Got people latching onto it and overspinning it like Bjorn Borg, that dates me, playing tennis. But bad news needs to travel fast because the sooner it gets to the right people, the more likely you are of having a plan to be able to reverse it. The better your lessons are learned if you get it out quicker. And there's a trust factor that builds up that says, I'm not going to shoot you if you show up with bad news. I need to understand what our options are, and let's get after it so we can go to do the next thing. And I love that because when I went through that kind of winter of badness that I had for 6 or 8 months, I didn't handle it as well as I should, and I decided the next time I had something major happen to me, I was going to handle it better, and it was going to be driven by internal, not external.
Yeah, I've never heard bad news travel fast, but it makes a whole lot of sense. All right, well, what doesn't make a lot of sense is the stuff that we continue to do here, but you know what? I keep showing up, and people keep wanting to be on the show, so we must be doing something right. All right,
I paid for my slot.
That's right.
Not many were available.
Crimson hot sauce. What's the color of the Hoosier? I'm sure they don't call it crimson like we do at the University of Kansas, or do they?
They do.
Okay.
Cream and crimson.
We have something in common.
Yes.
Also, a very rich basketball heritage that we share. I think the Hoosiers have not been on the up as they had been in the past, but I'm always looking forward to the Hoosier State coming back.
Me too.
I'm sure. You were at Lawrence this year, right? When they came into town. We went to you. We went to you,
and we had the game. We were in control the entire game and ended up losing by 3 or 4. Mm-hmm. Indiana did, and that hurt badly. Basketball is so in my blood because one of my high school rivals was the Milan Indians, and to keep the suspense down, they happened to be the team of the true story of the movie Hoosiers, because it is true, and they were right down the way from where I grew up. And basketball is in your blood.
Yes.
You go to Indiana. And we won in 76, 81, and 87. I'm old enough that all those were real to me, and I loved the 3. And then, unfortunately, we haven't won since then. I got used to winning, and I don't like not being good. We need to get back at it.
It's hard. I think if you're persistent and you have the commitment, it can happen. Now, the difference is, unlike in business where it is in college sports now, the NIL and a lot of different complexities that change the competitiveness of the game. So, there is that. You can't just put a field of team of good guys and expect to win. Now there's all sorts of things that get involved in that.
Yes, it is. That's true.
So, all right, so we're on 3. I think that one has a really good flavor.
It did. That had a little bit of tingle.
Good.
We're on the board.
So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, when you're trying to approach not necessarily a problem, but let's say an opportunity or a market segment, or you want to push something in a direction. What are some of the things you look for to help you find what's going to take it from A to B and then to D? How do you really take something from an idea to something that you can put out in front of people?
Love the question. I'm going to put it in a different context that I think is going to work. When I invest, I look for one thing first, and that's a big problem that needs to be solved and is not being solved or is being solved poorly. And I love that because that's like in a old staid category that's been around a few hundred years, it might just be a crack between things, but it's still real. Or it might be a new category and people just haven't figured it out as it's being evolved into new benefits. But I love finding problems that are not being taken care of. And then second of all, in the investing world, what I do is I bet on people. Once I found that problem, I bet on people because we're going to end up pivoting 2 or 3 times. We're probably going to be in the ramen noodle stage for a few times. We're going to have competitors that sneak around us and maybe even use some of our patents or IP. We're going to have good things and bad things happen, and the resilience of the person that I'm betting on makes all the difference in the world. So if the problem is big enough and can be simply solved and I got the right people, I think we can win.
Yeah, I think that's huge.
Companies are frustrated with the spicy costs for health benefits. Most C-suite executives believe that benefits costs are way too spicy and feel that the number 2 expense on their P&L is running hot. With NavMD, we help you win business, lower costs, and save time. Join us on our mission to revolutionize health benefits, one plan at a time.
All right, let's move on to number 4. This one's Black Garlic Carolina Reaper. So now we're going to start getting a little hotter.
They start to reflect the heat from the name.
Yes, and you'll also know, I keep putting the lid on, I don't need to do that. You'll notice that the sauce will get thicker.
There's a little zing there. It's good. But my opinion is relevant, or my opinion is dependent on my skill of eating hot. Maybe a useless skill. So I found it interesting you were talking about, how you doing? You all right?
Good,
Okay.
yep.
Want some
That
milk?
one's definitely hotter.
Yeah. Now we're starting to get into the heat. I'm not sure we
We're
should have
done
done the
with
bond to
spring
poor
training.
Harry.
Spring training
That's right.
is
We're
done.
done. We're done. They got, what is it, Lou in Major League? That guy's going to be bagging groceries next week. So, I think what you were talking about in relationship to what you look for in an investment, right? You're thinking about a big problem that needs to be solved, and then somebody that you believe in that can tackle that can weather all the storms that occur in that. Mm-hmm. So what is some of your advice to give to people on how to manage those storms? Because you were so right about there'll be ups and downs, there'll be highs and lows. What's some wisdom that you can share with people? Like when you are tasked with something that seems unsolvable or your chips are just continually down, how do you get yourself out of that and get back to a place of neutral and then being successful?
One of the reasons why I love doing things like this is I don't prepare, and that makes me think while you're talking and process through it, and therefore I give answers that I've usually never given before. They may be slightly off or way off, and that excites me because it tells me about myself. A few things that I would say. First of all, trait-wise, I love vulnerability, and when you're doing what you just talked about and trying to find the gaps in the market or see where the competitors aren't solving the problems, some of the time you have to point to vulnerability, and it has to do with the leader talking to the people that they're dealing with to making sure they're not on a throne and they're having a good take, but back and forth. The other word I use, and it's a boring word, it's one of my favorite in all my presentations, it's called consistency. As a leader, one of the things you need to do, no matter what's going on inside, is you have to be as consistent as you can. Can you be a flatliner? No. And I'm a bit of an extrovert up and downer, but I don't get messed with by problems. I want to understand it. I want to figure out what our options are, and I want to get everybody on board, and I want to go try to fix it. So consistency is hugely important in that. And then the truth telling, because the big thing that happens, particularly in big companies, is it's so easy to hide, not do your job well, or kick the can down the road where a product progress is a meeting. That makes me crazy. I don't care about your meeting. You could have a phone call for 10 minutes, or you could have a meeting with 20 people for 3 hours. I want to know what the plan is and what you're going to do about it and how quickly you're going to go and how you're going to measure results. And I think if you really keep it down to those blocks, what happens is everybody's comfortable that they're not being poked at, they're not being singled out, they know what they need to work on, and everybody going in the same direction is amazing. I do not like KU basketball because I'm jealous of them as an Indiana guy. Bill Self is amazing. He does better when he has less talent that listens more and acts as a team, as opposed to 7 people that might have NBA aspirations. Everybody has that problem, but he's amazing when he takes less talent and turns it into magic. That 08 team really was not that good. That's not fair. They were very good. They were not one of the best 2 teams and 3 teams in the country. I think, didn't they lose to Kentucky in the final game to Mr. Unibrow? That was amazing, and I think Bill Self would probably say that's my favorite team because of the things that I just mentioned about why.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting you talk about what to focus on when you're in those moments, and I think that's powerful too. It's weird, if you think back to the things that people teach you, very rarely do they teach you how to accept a compliment, right? Because you don't know what to do when someone says, "You've done a phenomenal job," and either you're awkward or you're hyper ego, and then the other thing they don't teach is, how do you handle adversity and what are the things you have to do to pick yourself back up? And so as you were talking through that, I was thinking about, those steps of keep yourself in this boundary, focus on these things, and if you can get some momentum doing those things, then you can get yourself out of it. But if you're worried about all the stuff out here, then you're just going to be always focused on the stuff out here.
You'll appreciate this. I make up simple little anecdotes. My goal as a leader is to have 95% of the attention and energy of my org going in the direction that I want and that we need to go on in order to win. And the other 5 is we're humans. We complain a little bit about our boss. We don't like our PTO policy, whatever. I think most companies get 60 or 70% out of people because they do layoffs continually, and so it makes people worried about their job, or they put ridiculous policies or procedures or something in place, and so people have something to focus on and talk about that isn't what you want. If you can get to 95, I don't care the strategy of your competitor, you're going to whip them.
I agree. Yeah, I tell our team all the time, it's therapeutic to come out of the office, hem-haw about what's going on a little bit, get that out, but let's do it for 5-10 minutes and then move on.
5%.
Let's move on.
Yeah. I love that. By the way, my lips are burning now.
I like that. All right, give yourself less than that. I'm talking about a drip. So this one is funny, and I will always bring up Wayne until somebody says something funnier. But this is Moruga Scorpion, and that is a country. And so
it's a country.
Wayne has now taken that country off of his travel list. It's a no travel warning from the Simeon family.
All right.
So this is number 5, just a little bit. And this is getting you ready for number 6. But again, you got that strong vinegar, a little zip there. All good.
Woo!
Mm-hmm. Get you a second to get some water.
It was good, but it was warm.
Mm-hmm. This part, the initial piece of this is it's very quick. You'll have a minute and a half, 2 minutes of it bothering you. Maybe it goes a little longer. Mm-hmm. The bigger question is how is your stomach going to process it? So I'm going to recommend you go home, take some antacids. If you like vanilla bean lattes from Starbucks, those are good because you want to coat your stomach and get some of the acidity out. So anyway,
nice.
I digress.
You're giving me too much help, but thank you.
I'm giving you some help. I mean, you're giving us help. All this pearls of wisdom. Think about, and maybe not the number 1, but I'm sure you get asked for advice a lot from early entrepreneurs on to seasoned veterans. Like, what do you think the top 1 or 2 pieces of advice they ask you for, and why do you think they ask you for that specific advice? Does anything come to mind?
Yes. It has to do with what I'm going to call my superpower. That's a silly term. I have a friend that works at Amazon, by the way, and in the personnel review, the annual personnel review, it asks, what's your superpower? And then other people answer it for you also. I thought it was a cool way.
Yeah,
it's kind of cool. My superpower has to do with how I treat people. And I'm not going to get into the details of it, but as I was growing up, I learned that people are incredibly powerful if you treat them well and you don't think of yourself as better than them. And then what happens is you have the chance to explode something in a positive direction. I have a stated goal when I run a business that I want to have the culture be one that people desperately want to work in, and I choose that word. If you choose a word like that, you better have a plan behind it. You can't say, I want you to desperately work for me, and if you don't do anything about it. And I would put things in place with regard to servant leadership, which inverts the power model and puts me serving the people in my org. I do things where I focus on being consistent and fair. And if one of my best employees wants a break or something that's against a policy or rule, I know that if I say yes to them and one of my mediocre employees walks in 2 days later and asks me the same thing, the answer better be the same. Or you change the policy. I don't have a problem with either one of those, but don't get into that. Don't make that mistake. And so I created an environment where people opt in. When Embark spun from Sprint, I really didn't have a team, and I was picking people to man the ship and to get the new business going because we had spun off from Sprint and we didn't bring all the people. And the HR folks called me, and I put this in my book and said, people are calling and saying they want to work in your group. And when the HR person says, what job do you want? They say, we don't care. We just want to work in Harry's group. And the boss said, this is more like recruiting than it is interviewing to try to get people. And I said, don't know exactly why and how it's happening, but thank you, because that gives me a longer list of people to choose from. And it gives me better people, which spirals it upward, which creates a culture, which creates better business, which creates a culture and just spirals upward. And so I would say what I was known for was the cultural side of it, but the sneaky part about it is the culture part led to big, great business results.
Yeah, I mean, culture, it's a buzzword, and I think people do use it. But when you really think about what makes a company special, nobody's ever going to say, well, it's how much they pay me, or it's how much PTO they give me. It's really going to be a combination of a lot of those things, but mainly it's how do you make me feel? Because you can always find someone to pay you more. That's not hard. If you're good at something, you can find. In fact, even if you're not good at something, you typically get somebody to pay you more. You can find a place that's going to give you more flexibility or give you that, but how do they treat you? How do they make you feel? Those are the things that give people the reason to find uncommon results. Mm-hmm. Because not everybody wants to wake up and go to work every day. Let's just be honest. What makes you get up and go to work? The culture. What makes you get up and work harder than you know you can? Culture. So I think having that as your superpower is maybe a secret to why you've been so successful. Minus the one time in the .com. So I'm not sure what you did with the culture there. Do you feed them a bunch of hot sauce?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so we are to question 6. We're ready to go do this here. One little touch. Don't do that.
Woo!
Yeah, so we made a little bit of a mistake. So by putting the 5th one differently, that one hits harder. We'll have to remember that. Kind of my hypothesis, though.
Whoa. Okay.
You awake now?
Yeah. My head is sweating, but when you have a hairline like mine, that's common.
We'll give you a second to let that marinate a little bit. That one even got me a little bit today.
Death nectar.
Yeah, so this is by Grinders, 337,000 Scoville.
It's getting hotter.
Yep. Yeah, you just mixed it around with your water. Take some milk. It'll calm you down a little bit. I'm gonna have another wing. Mix them up.
Does this pop off? Yeah, I guess it is. I was trying to screw it off.
I'll help you a little bit.
Ooh, that helps. Way better than the water.
All right. Well, you ready to go? Question 6.
Okay.
Do you want to tell the listeners about your books? You brought them with you. Let's talk to them.
Sure. So I have a keynote speaking business. I travel around the country and give 45-minute speeches, really simple books that I outlined that talk about how I believe you can be successful. Wrote the first one in 2012, 2016, and 2020. The leadership book, the first one I wrote, I love it. And it really is very simple. I can lay it out for you very quickly. It has to do with leadership on 3 levels. Leadership of yourself, because my theory is it is impossible to get people to follow you unless you lead yourself.
Right.
Once you get that down, you move up, and then you have the ability to lead people, and you lead people this way, and this way. And I think you can be effective if you lead yourself. You can lead people. And then leading the business, which is the fun part, because that enables people to not worry about you. You got their back. You're being consistent. You're being vulnerable, and so they'll go to the ends of the earth. Excuse me. They'll go to the ends of the earth to help you. And so I love the idea of just very simply leading yourself, leading people, leading the business. And then the culture book is what I do is I talk about culture with regard to people and having attractors around. An attractor is very simply somebody that people want to be with.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of the guy that's great or the gal that's great at their job, but you don't want to deal with them at all. And then once you figure that out, you get processes and procedures that aren't silly and stupid. Most companies have a number of those. Employees know it. They roll their eyes. You're putting the employees in front of customers with bad processes and procedures. Horrible. You can fix that. And then performance, get everybody on the same page, help them understand from a communication standpoint what the goals are and how they fit. It's cool. And the final point, I wrote this. This is a fun book. It's about mindset. So it isn't as much about business as it is about life. And in three simple bullet points, I lay out how I think you need to have a mindset to win. Number one is you need to be an attractor. You need to be one of those people that people go, I'll be on your team. I'm with you. Or come with me. I've got the skill set and the tools to do this, and you're going to really enjoy this. So be an attractor. I think that's immeasurably important, particularly for people early in their career. Second point is embrace the crookedness of life. I'm telling you, everybody should plan. You need to have a plan. The plan's not going to happen. It may only deviate by this much. It may deviate by this much. It's not going to happen. Embracing the idea that it's not going to happen and what are you going to do and how are you going to do it, and you're going to think of that as my differential advantage versus my competition, because I knew it was going to change, didn't know how, didn't worry about that, but once it did, we're going to get after it, and I love that. That has to do with resilience and grit. And then the third part is live to learn. I like to try to get better at something every day. It's fun for me, and it may just be following a baseball team and understanding the ins and outs of their system and organization and trades and stuff. I don't care what it is. It could have to do with a huge business problem you're trying to face. But at the end of the day, living to learn is important because it keeps you relevant, it keeps you engaged, and gives you a better chance to win. So these books are so fun. I give the entire speaking fee to charity for my wife, but she said something very interesting. She said, even if I wasn't sick, she has a malignant brain tumor, she said, you'd be doing this anyway because it's what you like to do. You like to coach, you like to teach, and you like to win.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll put that on our LinkedIn post, so we'll put the link to purchase the book. 100% goes to charity, 100% gross, which I think is important for those that know the difference between gross and net. Sometimes it's fuzzy in my world. You know, you said something interesting about being an attractor before we get to this last question, but it reminds me, I had some wonderful mentors when I was younger. I mean, I'm sure it's hard to believe I was headstrong as a young man. I probably still am, but I was a good individual contributor. I mean, I always knew I wanted to be a leader, but I thought to be a leader, I had to be the best. And that's how they hire leaders, which we both know isn't the best way to hire a leader. But I had one of my leaders pull me aside and said, David, you know, we really appreciate what you're doing, but you can be one of two people. You can be the guy that the light shines the brightest, or either be the guy that rallies people around you and then everybody's light shines brighter. And that has stuck with me from when he said that, because he's saying you can do all this by yourself and you'll make lots of money and be successful, but if you want to be a leader, you can be way more successful, way more impactful over here. And, there are those few things in your life that people say to you and they stick with you forever. That's one of those things. And when you said attractor, that was the first thing my mind went is that coaching.
Wow. Thanks for sharing it.
Yeah.
That was cool.
All right. So is the heat dissipating just a little bit, or are you still at fever pitch? Okay. Maybe that's just me.
That's good.
All right. What's one thing about you that others would be surprised to learn?
I'm going to give you one that's completely trivial, but it's very me, and then I'm going to give you a real answer. I am a Diet Coke fiend. I love Diet Coke. The answer to the question, is Diet Pepsi okay, is clear. No. And more importantly, QT and McDonald's Fountain are better than the rest. So what I do is I go out of my way to find them. So that's one thing I would say.
Okay, that's huge.
I'm a little embarrassed by that, but, you got me going here, and
Yeah.
here we go. So there's one. The other one has to do with athletics. I wanted desperately to be a professional athlete, and I like to say when I was 6, it was clear that wasn't going to happen. No size, no speed, no, it just isn't going to happen. But I realized I run the same speed for 5 miles as I do for 100 yards. So I became a long-distance runner. Now, let me be really clear. I don't like running. But it was something that I could do and I could compete with, and I love sports. So I went to Vanderbilt and I became a runner. I was a long-distance runner, ran cross-country and track. And I hate to lose. And I did well, and I set the school record at Vanderbilt in 1982, and it stood for 35 years. And I was damned proud of that, David.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I got out of school, and I stopped running because I didn't run because I liked running. I ran because it gave me something to compete in that I could get better in and potentially win with, and it was fun, and I enjoyed it. And I think if you look at me, you could lose a lot of bar bets trying to figure out who the guy in the room is that has the 10,000 meter, that had the 10,000 meter record at Vanderbilt for a while.
Now, did somebody blow it away or just barely beat it?
Interesting. A friend of mine was the coach, and he called me and said, I got a kid that's going to break your record this year. This was, and we were at the South Peanut. A bunch of friends of mine meet once a month, and that was the night of the race, and it was a night race at the University of Tennessee, and I got a phone call, and I got the picture that he broke it. He broke it by 19 seconds, so he put it pretty significant. But in the ensuing 3 years, it was broken 4 or 5 times. So what happened was it had this huge long run, and then boom, 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 it started getting broken. And I sent him a note, by the way, and we had a shot toast to him. Jake V was his last name, V period, Jake V. And we toasted him and to my record and to losing it.
Yeah, really cool. Did you make sure that they were checked for PEDs? I mean, these are... I found that we're now having this run of different acronyms. Last was PPP, PPE, now we have PED, so they're also all Ps. All right, since we don't have the opportunity to have you on every time, and you've been a great guest. I'm going to give the watchers another question because I think this is going to be a good one. I'm interested to see what you have to say. What's one lesson you've learned that you think everyone should learn at some point?
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that question. Let me process a minute.
I read that and I go, I got to read it. You're the guy to answer this.
Bet on people. I have had call centers of 200 people that had poor business results and bad morale, and what happened was I found the person that you and I would describe as an attractor and a leader and put them in that call center, and within 3 months, the results were lifted up. The vibe of the entire building was different. They were enjoying themselves and they were having fun. And I realized, I call it the 98-2 rule. If treated like adults given the tools to do the job, and made feel like they're connected to something bigger than themselves, 98% of the people that I have observed will do solid to great work, and solid's fine. 2% are cheaters and liars. Most people believe that ratio is more like 70-30. I've seen it work. And once you've seen it work, you realize people don't want to self-identify as being lazy or not good at their job, but they're in an environment with the wrong people and the wrong vibes and the wrong culture, and therefore they don't give you their best. They give you a 70% effort, and it ain't working. When you make the changes that I talked about in terms of a tractor and a leader, you find all of a sudden these people that were grumpy before and weren't good and were darn near getting fired, all of a sudden they're doing great, or they're doing fine at least. And you realize if you bet on people, you can win, and that's what I've done.
I love it. Well, Harry, I had high expectations for this episode. You have far and above exceeded them. It was great to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hope everyone enjoyed it. I'm David Voorhees, host of Running Hot, the Business Insurance Podcast. Be ready for our next edition. I'm sure it will be equally compelling, but I'm not sure we'll be able to match the level that Harry brought. Thank you.